Mr. Fox tars his roof. Mr. Fox had been annoyed very much by the mischievous squirrel brothers, Benny and Bobby. They ran over his roof at the very hours when he wanted to sleep. They tossed nuts and stones. Mr. Fox was sure it was stones he heard sometimes rolling over his roof. And how could anyone sleep with things rattling on a tin roof? One nice rainy morning when Benny and Bobby did not come out to play, Mr. Fox had had a good sleep, and he decided that it was time he set to work thinking up some way to be rid of those bad squirrel boys for good. There must be some way I can drive them off my roof, thought Mr. Fox. I have tried to catch them, but I might as well try to catch a lively flea as those squirrel boys, and they are not the least frightened by my threats. So something must be done to the roof so they will not care to play there. Now, let me see. Mr. Fox decided he would cover his roof with tar. That will be a good thing to keep out the water, and it will be soft enough this warm weather so that their feet will stick to it, and maybe their pushy tails of which they are so proud. I'll try it. One pleasant morning, not long after, when Benny and Bobby Squirrel came running through the woods with their pouches filled with nuts, they were surprised to see on their playground Mr. Fox hard at work. "What's he doing?" asked Benny, running up a tree to get a better look. "He is painting it," answered Bobby, who was peeking from behind a bunch of leaves. "He thinks that will keep us off, but as soon as it dries we can play there just as well as ever." Mr. Fox did not pretend to see the squirrel boys, but he knew they were there, watching, and he kept right on, humming a tune as he worked. By and by it was finished, and Mr. Fox climbed down the ladder and went into the house. As he looked out of the window, he saw Benny and Bobby running down the path. "Well, if they don't get stuck on the tar because it has frightened them away," he thought, "I shall not mind the work I did this morning." But the next morning Mr. Fox heard something that made him sit up in bed and listen. "They are back," he said, for he knew it was Benny and his brother running up the side of the house. In a second more they would be on the roof. "Oh!" squeaked one as his feet stuck to the sticky tar. Mr. Fox began to laugh. "I must see what is going on," he said. So he jumped out of bed and put the ladder up the big chimney, and up he went. Benny Squirrel had jumped from the eaves trough right on the tarred roof, and there he was, both feet stuck, and the tip of his tail caught too. Bobby had been more cautious and had only his forepaws on the roof. His hind feet were on the eaves trough where there wasn't any tar. Mr. Fox laughed right out loud when he saw their plight. "Guess you will keep away from my roof," he said. "That is, if you ever get away. Maybe you will have to stay there." Benny and Bobby were scared. "Oh, Mr. Fox," they called as Mr. Fox's head disappeared down the chimney. "Please, Mr. Fox, help us get off this sticky place, and we will never come here again. Honest, we won't." Mr. Fox was laughing so hard he almost tumbled off the ladder, but he was very sober when he looked over the chimney top again. "What's that you said? Promise never to come on my roof again? All right, I'll see what can be done." All the time Bobby and Benny were tugging to get away as hard as they could, and pretty soon Bobby managed to free his front paws, but with such a jerk that he lost his balance, and over he tumbled into the tub of rainwater on the ground below. Bobby scrambled out nearly dead with fright, but he quickly remembered his brother and ran back to help him. His front feet did not work very well, for a bit of the tar still clung to them and kept him from moving as fast as he usually did. But he managed to reach the roof and saw that Benny had made his way almost to the edge, but some of his beautiful tail was left behind him. Mr. Fox had returned to the chimney top, now with a long pole on the end of which he had placed a big lump of lard. "Here," he said, pushing the end with the lard to the squirrel boys. Just rub that on your feet, and you can get along better, I think. But remember, if you break your promise and come around here mornings waking me up, something worse than this may happen to you." Benny and Bobby were too glad to be able to get off the roof to make any reply, but Mr. Fox was satisfied that they would not bother him any more. And as he watched them making their way slowly through the woods, he laughed out loud, for Bobby's feet still carried some of the tar on him, and they gathered leaves as he went along until his small feet were almost as bushy as his once beautiful tail. So Benny and Bobby would have to stop and pull off the leaves. No wonder Mr. Fox laughed. But his laughing cost him dear, for the squirrel boys heard it. "We only promised not to go on his roof," said Benny, who felt he was the most injured. "What do you mean?" inquired Bobby. "You wait until I get all this tar off my feet," replied his brother, as Mr. Fox's laugh rang out again. "You just wait and see. We won't go on his roof, but we will find some way to pay him for this trick. You see if we don't." Mr. Fox had no more broken slumbers, and he quite forgot the Squirrel brothers until something happened one day to make him remember them for a long time. Mr. Fox had found an old hammock up at Mr. Man's farm, so he brought it home and swung it between two trees beside his house, and on warm afternoons he took his nap in it. And so it happened that Benny and Bobby Squirrel, running along the wood paths one day, spied him. Benny saw him first, and sat up very straight and still. His little bright eyes sparkled as he winked at Bobby and pointed to the limbs of one of the trees to which the hammock was fastened. Bobby knew without asking any questions what his brother meant, and in a jiffy he was at the place where the hammock was tied to a branch. Benny was at the other end of the hammock as soon as his brother had reached his place. They looked at each other and nodded their heads, and then each little squirrel began to gnaw. It didn't take long, and Mr. Fox dropped with a hard bang on the stones beneath the hammock. "Oh!" he groaned as he picked himself up. "My back, my poor back! It is broken, I know." "Rub some lard on it," chattered Benny Squirrel far up in the tree. "That may help some." And then, making the woods ring with their chatter, the two mischievous squirrel boys made their way through the trees out of the wood. Rubbing his back, Mr. Fox limped into the house. "How some folks can be so heartless, I do not understand," he said. "I wonder if those bad squirrels have been holding a grudge against me for that simple little trick I played on them a long time ago. Now, I wonder, oh, my poor back."